I'm guessing that people's issues with Doctor Who, well, in this case, New Who, started very early on. Today, we're going to be looking at The Girl in the Fireplace. The Girl in the Fireplace is something that I've watched more than just once. When I first watched it, I didn't have many an issue with it. Now that I'm older, however, though, I've got some problems. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters.
I crown you Queen of the Woke!
Let's chat about it. Yes, today is Doctor Who Sunday, and we're talking about The Girl in the Fireplace, which was voted by you, the subscriber. To vote on the current poll, please head on over to the post page where you can find it. I release a new poll every Saturday at 10 a.m., providing I remember, because I forgot last week. I do apologise. Please do keep it friendly in the chat and let me know what you think about The Girl in the Fireplace. Is it a good story? Is it fun? Is it dramatic? What your highs, what your lows, that kind of thing. So please do let me know. So The Girl in the Fireplace is a Stephen Moffat story. It aired on the 6th of May 2006 to 7.9 million people. So our story starts with Madame de Pompadour, or Renette, which is her name, calling for the doctor. She is calling for him, but how does she know? How does she know him? That's what the question we're asking. Why does she know him? She is telling him that the Clockwork Men, at least I think that's what they're called, I've always called them Clockwork Men anyway, are coming. The story starts off with screaming and shouting and running and a little bit of drama. It cuts to the opening titles, and then we see the Doctor, Rose, and Mickey, who has now joined the TARDIS on a spaceship. This spaceship is not an ordinary spaceship, though. This spaceship is connected to Versailles in the 18th century, but the ship is in the 51st century. This leaves the Doctor with questions. Why would this ship want to be connected to Versailles specifically? And what is it that they want with Renette? Why is it that this ship is specifically punching its power through the universe? Why is it they're specifically focusing on certain points in the life of Renette? The Doctor, Rose, and Mickey spend the majority of the story jumping through two different time periods at different points in history, but at the same time in present day, pretty much, give or take, several hours. The Doctor discovers the Clockwork Man in Renette's bedroom and takes him back to the ship. He discovers that the head is made completely of mechanics, much like a clock. And that's where all the ticking noises are coming from. They've broken the clocks so that people would not notice two clocks were ticking. The Doctor discovers that they have been scanning the brain of Renette and saying that she is not complete. And they're waiting because they were looking for a specific point in time where she would be complete, which is 37 years old. And the reason why, that's the age of the ship. They specifically wanted her brain, but the Doctor could not really work out why they wanted her brain. However, Mickey and Rose do discover body parts all over the ship, and this is because the ship had stopped running, and the Clockwork Men's job was to repair the ship, but they didn't have the parts. So they used the parts of humans instead. It becomes a race against time because the Doctor and Rose and Mickey need to stop Madame de Pompadour from losing her head. He is able to defeat the Clockwork Men and prevent their access back to the ship. He says that he's going to take Madame de Pompadour with him whilst travelling. He goes back to the 51st century after telling her to choose a star. He gets Rose and Mickey into the TARDIS and then he returns, only to discover that he was too late. Madame de Pompadour had died at age 43. She had left the Doctor with a note, and the Doctor leaves Versailles. The Doctor, Rose, and Mickey never discover the reason why the Clockwork Men specifically wanted the brain of Madame de Pompadour. However, we as a viewer do find out that reason, and that is because the ship is called SS Madame de Pompadour. So, It's timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly type of story. Gosh, I hate that. I must admit that it's not my favorite way of describing a story. I would rather prefer time being in a state of flux, although that makes me think of flux, and I don't like that. But that's what I would rather at the same time, to be honest with you. Now, I would say that I quite like this story in many respects. Normally, when we do get a historical, I like the focus to be almost entirely historical. And if there are some sci fi elements that are, I don't know, thrown in with it, it works great. You know, fine, cool, I'll take it. However, this one is a little bit on the different side because, well, it's 50-50. We've got some in the 51st century and then some in the 18th century in France Versailles. Now, that type of story, when that happens, you often wonder how on earth are they going to get around making this work? This works to a massive degree. Now, I know that I said I've got more issues with it now compared to when I first watched it. And bearing in mind, I was a lot younger then, but as a concept, it does work. In this case, I think it's the balance. I really do. How much sci-fi do you put in? How much history do you put in? Obviously, we're learning about Renette or Madame de Pompadour as she becomes known later on in her life. She's quite an obscure historical character, but she was real. But we only get to see flashes of her life, but it's not enough. But sorry, it is enough. Sorry, excuse me, for the viewer to know who she is and her goals and what she is about. Would she have been a fixed point in history? I suppose in the context of this story, she is because obviously she's King Louis's mistress. Do I think that we could have seen more with history? Yeah, 100%. It could have been an entirely historical story. But at the same time, did it need more history? No. No, it was fine as it was at the same time. So I just contradict myself. Well done, Rachel. Ha ha. But what do you think? I think that's important as well. What you think. Was it enough history? Was it not? I don't know. Floor open to you on that one. The opening is great. The opening is dramatic. Could it have been a bit longer and a little bit more action based? 100% yes. But we didn't know what, and I say this loosely, enemy we were getting. So they couldn't really reveal it other than the name. That means, that aside, I still really like the opening. Let's just put it like that. Now, let's talk about these clockwork men. Dare I say, this is probably the creepiest, other than the weeping angels, that Doctor Who has produced in New Who. And it's Stephen Moffat again, isn't it? I think, and that's just my opinion. Okay. Now, thankfully, they've only ever been used once. At least I don't recall them being used again. And I certainly hope that they don't come back. They are definitely the type of character that I would consider one and done. I kind of feel sorry for them though, actually. Their ship breaks down, they've got no parts, so they did what they were programmed to do. And obviously, behaving in a 2D way, they used what they had, which was the parts of humans. But then they realized that they still had a problem. So they were trying to do what they thought was right and what they were programmed to do, and they went and tried to get the brain of Madame de Pompadour, Renette. So what? Are they really evil? I suppose evil is relative, just an opinion there, by the way. Everyone who we deem evil think they are perhaps doing the right thing. The makeup for these characters, their masks, their costumes, they are very creepy. Not terrifying or anything like that. They're probably the closest that you would get to the Autons, though. I'm not the biggest fan of masks, to be quite frank. That doesn't apply to everyday masks or commedia dell'arte masks and things like that, because I had to work with those. But it's more of the tribal type of masks. You know what I mean? The ones that are a little bit more terrifying and purposely intimidating. It's not a phobia. It's not like mannequins. I'm just not all that keen on them. Now, the defeat of the Clockwork Men, that's anticlimactic. I was expecting a much more dramatic finish to this story. They are specifically, that's the word of this particular video, isn't it? Specifically looking for the brain of Renette. I was expecting some deaths and some dramatic stunts, but it just didn't happen, obviously, other than losing Renette at the end. And then the doctor essentially says, "Oh, yeah, you have no way back, so goodbye." And they power down, and that's it. It's like, what? I mean, talk about the definition of one of my favorite phrases to describe the current state of Doctor Who: wet fart being very appropriate right here, right now. This story didn't need to be massively long. Yes, it could have done with a bit of extra time, but it didn't need several parts or anything like that, so it was fine as the one part as it was. But we could have at least seen them go down with an epic battle in an attempt to take Renette's head or brain. Compared to that, though, with the introduction, well, it just fell flat on its face. It went out. Years ago, when I watched it, I was like, oh, okay, it's over. That's a pretty cool story. But now I'm like, well, you could have done more with that. And that's obviously coming from my experiences and my acting experience and knowing what makes a good story now. So that's one of my issues from, now compared to back then anyway. The ending just wasn't satisfying. Yet the introduction at the beginning, when we see the first one in Renette's bedroom, that's a fantastic jump scare. It's really good. You don't realize that there was actually something underneath that bed. It's difficult to see. And then that hand just swipes out at the doctor. Brilliant. And I wish we had more of that in this particular story. We also didn't have too much sonic screwdriver. I just thought I'd add that in there. Wasn't very much of it at all, so I approve. And I also really love the Doctor's admiration for the Clockwork Men and how they look. The Doctor has very strong morals, but he still appreciates something even if he doesn't agree with them. David played it with just the right amount of admiration. The other thing that was really good about these Clockwork characters, and also very creepy, was the fact that they used human body parts to repair their ship because they did not have the correct parts. Now, I've already spoken about that, but the idea and the concept of taking human parts, at least, I think they were human parts from what was implied, and putting them in to power the ship, it's very dystopian and very creepy writing. It's that close to home feeling that Stephen Moffat is quite good at, actually. There's a certain amount of sadness in this story, though, isn't there? The crew of the ship, well, their body parts were used to help maintain the ship. The Clockwork Men are doing their best to help the ship run, but they end up losing their purpose. And the story results in the death of Madame de Pompadour anyway. She never got her trip in the TARDIS. She dies at age 43, and that's really sad because she leaves a letter and we get it in a voiceover by Sophia Miles. And you can see how that affects the Doctor, even though he had just met her. I like the idea that they are looking through time windows on this ship. However, there's a certain degree of sadness looking through the time windows too. Now, one issue that I do have with this story, and I had it when I watched it originally as well, is the fact that Madame de Pompadour describes the Doctor as a lonely man, a lonely Time Lord. Now, the one thing that Russell T Davies did was get rid of the Time Lords for the first two series. And I think in retrospect, for the first couple of series back, that was a really good idea. Shocking, I know. But even then, I never considered the Doctor to be, well, alone. He always had his companions. He always had his ship. He was always traveling and meeting people. And to me, that's not necessarily what I would dictate to be loneliness. that's going out of your way to take your time to explore and to learn about other people. So I never really liked that description of the doctor being lonely. I didn't find it very apt at all because I never saw that with him. And I never saw it with him in New Who, just to be clear. So, New Who, goodness me, this story was what, 2006? It's almost 20 years old. So, yes, I didn't really like the fact it was said that the doctor was a lonely man. And there was another thing that I don't like now so much. And I think maybe this is just me. Might we may being pedantic here, okay? So just a little precursor to that, because I might get on my high horse. The doctor meets Renette when she is a child. But because he's jumping through time windows, he meets her at various stages in her life pretty quickly. Although to her it seems like a long time, sorry, not dime, but time. And this is why it may seem a bit high horse pedantic. That kiss scene between the doctor and Madame de Pompadour, for me personally, I find problematic because a few moments earlier he'd met her as a child, okay, and now he's meeting her as an adult and they're kissing. I know she initiates it, okay, so it's not entirely his fault, but the fact that he gloats about it, first of all, I don't really think that the doctor would gloat about kissing anyone. But, that was a kiss of passion from her. Can't lie about that. And secondly, she was just a child just before that. Now, I know it's set in 18th century, in the 51st century, and things in time are very different, and the coming of age was very different. But, well, it just irks me a little bit. So, yeah, not my favorite thing. I I won't lie. Not my favorite thing. Okay. Now, my high horse has come down a little bit. Let's talk about the end shot of this though. It's probably my favorite bit. And that's not because the story had finished. I I said to you that this story, but it's full of sadness from the Doctor, Madame de Pompadour, the Clockwork Man. Well, we don't find out a reason why the Clockwork Men wanted Madame de Pompadour's brain or head, but well, the Doctor and Rose and Mickey don't, but the viewer does. Now, I don't mind the fact that they don't find out, and I like the fact that we know. It's because their ship is called SS Madame de Pompadour, and that in itself I find very sad. I do find that quite sad. They felt like she was the fitting choice because of what the ship was called. So they thought her head, her mind, could control the ship and be the brains of the ship. Anyway, I find that quite sad. The doctor doesn't necessarily need to be able to solve everything. And I like that quality when they put that into Doctor Who. And I especially like it when they give us the final answer. So we are in the know, but the doctor is not. Now, I just want to be clear here. I mean that specifically, that word again, specifically, for the smaller mysteries, the tiny little bits, not the bigger bits. He definitely needs to solve those because otherwise he just wouldn't be our hero, would he? But, the smaller, tiny little bits of details that he might not pick up, but we would. I don't mind that at all. That's just a personal preference. I know other people would prefer the doctor to know it all, but for me, I quite like it in that case. I also would like to say that I think Mickey is a brilliant addition to the TARDIS. They should have done it sooner, but of course we had Captain Jack, so that's okay because I thought Captain Jack was also a brilliant addition to the TARDIS too. Now, thankfully, in this particular story, they didn't really make him an absolute stupid person, a stupid man in this one, because they have a tendency, the writers, to do that. Stephen Moffat, not so much in this case. And I would also like to say that I think Sophia Myles as Renette, or Madame de Pompadour, was also a fantastic casting choice. She brings a certain amount of dignity and class to, well, the character of Renette. I mean, I don't know how she would have been Renette, Madame de Pompadour, in history, really, but I just think that it was an ideal choice and she was just fabulous in it. Would it also be so genius to say, would it be a bad idea to have a historical character back in the TARDIS, even a fixed point in time character like Renette, even though that's debatable? I would like to think so. Anyway, that is what I think about this story. Now we're going to take a look at what you think, because I did ask you. So, Nearly Sane says, lots of nice stuff in it. One of the best looking episodes, great performances from Sophia Miles, weird characterization of the Doctor, including a bit of Groo Ming. Yeah, I would say that. I would agree with that. Visually, it's fantastic looking. The costumes in this is one of the things that I love about this story and, well, period pieces in general. I think it's because you get to see what people wore hundreds of years ago in different countries and obviously in UK history as well. And that's good. It's a good lesson from Doctor Who. One of the things that I still wish would happen a lot more, though, is that we get to see the companions wearing the period costumes, because we, as human beings, present day human beings, we like that sort of thing. We would like to wear or try out these period pieces costumes, and I think the companions could have a lot of fun doing that. I remember my youngest brother, as a child, tried on some Roman chainmail and got stuck in it. So, it's always fun trying on period piece clothing. Doc Martin says, in hindsight, it's overrated nonsense where the Doctor fell in love with someone he met for a few hours. The clockwork robots were just okay. They never actually appeared as a credible threat, and their motivation was frankly daft. It doesn't hold up to repeated views. I stand by what I said, personally, that I think the motivation in this case was a sad motivation. But in that sense, we can all have our different opinions, and that's absolutely fine. We can like a story and somebody else can loathe the story. It's fine. I do agree, though, that the Doctor falling in love with someone, or whatever that was not a good idea. They shouldn't have gone down that route. It still irks me. Ugh. And I would admit that in recent years, I've not watched this story as much as I used to watch it. And Farsight says, a good premise, spoilt by the robots that never actually causing any harm to anyone in Versailles, and the Doctor suddenly going head over heels about an obscure character from human history. And again, that just didn't make any sense to me at all. But yes, I do agree that this story has a lot of good premise in it, and it had a lot of promise. It does have that wet fart aspect, which I wish now that I'm older it didn't have. But I still think overall it's a good story. It's a good mix of sci-fi and history, and there's enough history in there to learn about Madame de Pompadour. For a child to learn about that, I suppose it could be questionable about a mistress of the king. But it doesn't go into any sordid details. But I still like the story. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. Please do check out some of the other content that I have picked out for you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye bye. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget you can join me on my other platforms as well. I've got YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X, TikTok, Instagram, Locals, Substack, and I also have a Discord. Everything is linked below.